Das, was damals passiert ist, ist für mich absolut unvorstellbar.
Fassungslosigkeit.
Wenn ich daran denke, bin ich einfach nur sprachlos.
Es macht mich wütend. Ich schäme mich.
Wurzen had a number of quite interesting old buildings. It had a so-called dome, which is sort of cathedral, which was a nice spot, sparse and over-embellished church, Catholic church. And it had an old town hall, which was more like a castle converted into a town hall. At the end of our little short street there was a square, and that was the general home of the circus, which used to come once a year, and one or two fairs that went in the market square. And I decided it would be much more interesting than going to school to watch the circus tent being raised and all the things that were happening to actually be observed. So I played truant that day. And as so often happens, one of the people, families that knew us, saw little Hänschen standing there watching it all with great excitement. And at the same trip into town, told my father what they had seen. Well, being a naughty boy at that stage, and I didn't want to get into trouble, when my father came home and asked me what I had been doing, I said, oh, well, we learned this and that, and I pretended I'd been in school when I hadn't. So I'm afraid I felt his hand on my bottom a number of times, and I do remember this, because I well deserved it. But I have remembered this lesson very well, of it pays to pay the truth, to tell the truth. When I was 11 years old, boys changed into senior school, gymnasium, if they passed the little test, which I managed to do. In the beginning, I was quite happy and did well, but it was not long after I joined that the influence of Hitler and the Hitler Youth started to make an impact. And I stayed there until I was 16, when I was kicked out for political reasons and no other reason. Political reasons being that the Nazis insisted that the Jews must no longer go to secondary grammar school. As times became more difficult after Hitler came to power, the real troubles started. Storm clouds were gathering all around us. We became more and more aware that the Nazis were determined to chase all the Jews out of Germany. In spite of all this, my father felt, firstly, that he would outlast Hitler, which I'm afraid he was very wrong in. And secondly, he was determined that while he could, he should support other Jewish families by being able to buy from them goods which they produced or sold. In end of 1938, there was quite a disastrous event. A young, mentally deficient young fellow called Van der Lubbe, for reasons that nobody has ever quite established, although it is thought that he was paid or enticed by the Nazis to start a fire in the German parliament. And eventually Hitler used this fire to abolish all opposition politically and to really throw out all the Jews that were still left in Germany. This fire was an absolute total disaster. It was followed by a program of quite unbelievable nationwide width and depth in which the Nazis destroyed all remaining businesses quite deliberately. When this happened, I was still going to the trade school in Berlin, of which I will try to tell you a little bit later on. I do know that on that weekend, as soon as I heard that there was trouble, I immediately got on the train from Berlin to go home. And I was home when the Nazis came to fetch my father and Uncle Walter and me and made us go down the shop and clean up the mess that the thugs of the Nazis made of our business by smashing the windows and throwing the goods out of the window. And there were big crowds of people. It was an absolutely horrendous and terrifying experience. When the cleaning up was finished, we were marched back to the police station, where my father and Uncle Walter were kept in prison, and I was told to go home to my mother. You can imagine how she felt when I turned up in the state she was in. It was beyond belief, the cruelty of these people and the determination to be as evil as they could, to make it all as unpleasant as they could. However, Uncle Walter was taken away and sent to the really first big central concentration camp called Sachsenhausen. At that time, Walter was the first year student in chemistry at Dresden. He quite clearly had enjoyed himself very much and had grown up a great deal while he was away. But what followed is quite indicative of what was really to come. As far as I recall, Walter was kept in Sachsenhausen for about 3 weeks. The conditions there, it was November, were very bad. It was very cold, and they had no facilities of any kind other than perhaps taps of cold water. Nowhere to wash, nowhere to clean. It was just an indication of what would be coming in future. Unfortunately, just immediately before Walter was arrested, he had been caused an injury by spilling acid on his hand. And although it was properly attended to and dressed initially, it was badly neglected while he was in concentration camp. And this caused him to have a terrible infection all down one side of his body, especially his arm and his shoulders. It so happened that from then on, from that program onwards, I wanted to go home to my parents every weekend. And this day, this Friday or Saturday, I don't remember which, I would change trains in Leipzig to get onto the train to go to my home. And I saw this old man looking all doubled up and bent over and walking slowly. And I felt, there's one man who comes out of a concentration camp. And as I came closer, I realized that this old man was my 19-year-old brother Walter. There was also another family who had a small textile business opposite to where my father's original business was located. And that lady, or that family, was called Helft. Hilde Helft. She has had a most tragic life. She lost her husband very young. I think he died of cancer. And she had a little girl And when Hitler came, she thought she was lucky to get out to France. Unfortunately, the Germans came after them into France after the Dunkirk, and that little girl was most horrendously abused by the German soldiers, and eventually she did not survive. It was one of those most tragic stories. You will appreciate that at that time I was about 18 years old. And the time had come when I had to say goodbye to my parents with the almost certain knowledge that I would not see them again. And equally, they were certain that they would not see me again either. One quite amazing thing, however, was that although we were bullied by the Nazis, the many, many hundreds of people who were in the street, they did not come to hurt us. If anything, we had the feeling that they were there to try to shelter us and to try to protect us from too much harm.
Egal was kommt, wir sollten zusammenhalten.
Eine klare Haltung gegen Faschismus und Fremdenhass.
Wir dürfen nicht vergessen.
Jedes Leben ist lebenswert.
Gewalt bekämpft keinen Glauben.
Sowas darf sich nicht wiederholen.